Burlington Public Library, in partnership with the Art Gallery of Burlington, are proud to present a virtual art workshop. Today's topic, collage. We would like to acknowledge that the Burlington Public Library is located on the ancestral and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples. And we would like to express our gratitude as they continue to share their ancestral lands with us. And now, please join us in welcoming the Art Gallery of Burlington.
Hello, and welcome to the Art Gallery of Burlington's virtual workshop. My name is Heather, and I've been an arts educator with the gallery for over 20 years. It is my pleasure to bring to you today's collage workshop in partnership with the Burlington Public Library. So, without further ado, let's begin. Collage is a term used for a piece of art made from sticking two or more various materials together on a backing or a substrate. Although collage is often thought of as a modern art practice, history indicates that as early as the 11th century, Japanese artisans were creating beautiful images using torn handmade paper, a process known as shigiri. Roughly translated, shigiri means torn image. These images are made by shredding and tearing handmade paper and affixing it to a stiff surface. Images are often but not always nature-themed. These beautiful collages of layered paper are said to resemble watercolor paintings. Shigiri is still practiced as an art form today. The term collage, however, was coined in the early 1900s and was used to describe works of Cubist art by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. Picasso and Braque were the first modern-day artists to take newspaper and other materials and glue it onto their canvas. The word collage is derived from the French word coller, which means to glue. Dada artists of the 1920s took collage one step further and began to incorporate photographs in a technique called photomontage. They also began to apply what is known as ephemera into their art. Ephemera is considered to be forgotten or worthless material or memorabilia, such as wrappers, ticket stubs, magazine clippings, and stamps. Unlike the Cubist artists, whose collage art was primarily flat and devoted to still life arrangement, Dada collage artists used iconography, photography, and even three-dimensional objects in their works of collage. Following closely with the Dada art movement was Surrealism. Surrealist artists such as Joseph Cornell would adopt cut and paste and blend it with the Surrealist automatic approach. Automatism is a method of making art where the conscious thought is suppressed in favor of a more subconscious and by chance process. Surrealist collages were often dreamlike, fantastical, and outlandish. Cubomania was a common technique used by surrealists. By using images, prints, or photographs that were cut into squares, the artist would reassemble the piece with no conscious thought, leaving placement, order, and rotation to chance. During the last decade of his life, painter Henri Matisse would practice a style of collage art known as découpage. Découpage is an art technique that uses paper cutouts that are applied to another surface using a varnish over top to seal the material together. Using scissors and colorful paper painted in gouache, Matisse would cut and assemble various colored shapes onto canvas to create bright and lively compositions. Modern-day découpage uses commercial imagery that is applied to three-dimensional objects like furniture in a more decorative manner by hobbyists. Stilo Star is a visual artist based out of Hamilton, Ontario. Her work often includes collage created from many layers of imagery. Her show, 89 Dames, is currently on at the Art Gallery of Burlington until December 31st, 2020, and is a collection of 89 collaged works of art. In 89 Dames, she features the stories of historical Black women in entertainment by capturing their light, beauty, and energy in vibrant compositions. Star uses lace, brightly patterned paper, iconic imagery, and the process of image transfer to tell their stories with the intent to cement their place in art history. Before we begin, I'd like to go over the supplies I will be using today. So the first is scissors, obviously. Any pair of scissors will do. You just want to make sure that they're sharp. You can use decorative scissors that have different edgings too, as well if you'd like. Also, smaller scissors are helpful if you'd like to get into detail and do smaller cuttings. The next thing I have here are some decorative hole punches. I like to use these with the magazines to cut out swatches of color and interesting shapes. I use them in my backgrounds a lot. They're not necessary to have, but they're a lot of fun. The next thing I'll be using today is packing tape. It's clear packing tape. You want to make sure some packing tapes come in, it's like a yellow tinge. You want to make sure it's the clear packing tape. It works the best for what I'm going to be showing you to do packing tape transfers. The next thing I have here is Yoohoo glue stick. Now, not all glue sticks are made the same. I think Yoohoo glue sticks are probably the best that are out there. The glue really does a good job of sticking things down permanently. You're not running the risk of things falling off at a later date. Okay, next I have on hand, I have an acrylic matte medium and I have a decoupage sealer glue, kind of like Mod Podge. So basically, they're pretty interchangeable. Many artists use them for the same thing. Acrylic matte medium that you see here is you can use it to add texture to your paintings and collage. You can paint over it once it's dry, and you can use it like a glue or a sealer. Same with the decoupage glue. It sticks any paper to any kind of surface. Both of these come in different finishes like gloss or matte or semi-matte. It's up to you the preference that you would like. A gloss obviously gives it a more shiny coating. The acrylic medium also comes in soft, regular, and heavy. Heavy giving you the most texture, but for this project here today, I'm just using soft gel. Okay, next I'm going to just be discussing what type of substrate or surface you can make your collage on. Here we have like a 90-pound pressed watercolor paper, or you can use like a stiff cardstock. Next is a wooden, you can get wooden canvases or wooden boards. This is chipboard, which is they use to make cereal boxes from. And finally, you can use canvas, usually canvas that's primed works best. For today's project, I will be using watercolor paper. So next I'm just going to go through the variety of materials that I have here today that I'll be using for my collage. The first thing that I use a lot of is actually magazines that are meant for children or children's themed magazines. The illustrations tend to be nice and bright. They have cute and funny headlines and sayings that you can cut out if you like to use text. They often have, realistic photos of animals and all kinds of stuff. It's a really great place to get some really neat graphic imagery that you can use and alter for your collage. Next, I like to use art magazines like this watercolor magazine here. I like to use, bits and parts of paintings and color swatches. They often have full color images of paintings on them. I don't often use the whole image. I use parts, like I will take my hole punch, as I showed you earlier, and I will use that just to cut out interesting bits of color and texture within the image that you find in the magazine. So it's just a way to get color and texture. Another fantastic resource is old catalogs, like this Jordan Marsh illustrated catalog from the 1800s. It's a great resource for all these wonderful vintage illustrations. It's quite lovely. There's lots in there, so much you can use, and you don't really have to worry about copyright because the images are over hundreds of years old. It's a great resource to use. So if you see them, grab them. Another thing I like to use are like design books. I especially like them because they often have full color photos of fabric swatches and paintings that you can use for texture. Another thing I will use is pages from old books and dictionaries, like this in particular. The great thing about old books and dictionaries is that paper is often translucent and you're able to see through it, which allows you to get the different layers of texture. I have paper, beautiful paper, handmade paper, fabric swatches, doilies, paper doilies, wrapping paper, cardstock, or scrapbooking paper. So there's and it's not, this isn't everything. I mean, you're not limited to what you can use. It's very versatile. I have here some, I think it's rickrack or some kind of ribbon for decorative sewing. And then also, if you really get into collaging, this is what I do with my stuff, is I have a binder and it's separated with plastic folders. And whenever I'm going through a magazine or an old magazine before I go to throw it out, I start tearing out pages. If I have something that I like to use over and over again, I'll photocopy so I have more than one. But I'll tear out stuff, interesting faces, colors, patterns. Another thing that I like to do is I like to cut out a lot of words and sayings and phrases from the magazine. This is from a decorative magazine. I think it's like a swatch of a pillow. So that's a lot of fun. So yeah, I just keep it all organized in a way that makes sense to me. It probably doesn't make too much sense to you, but I have a general idea of what's in each folder. And it's just a way to keep things organized and neater and tidier from when I'm doing my collage. And old wallpaper swatches are great to use too. So there you have my organizational system for my cuttings for collage. Okay, so I'm here with my friend and colleague, Michelle. Michelle, wave hi. Michelle's going to play the peanut gallery in the background, asking me questions as I am doing the collage, just so it kind of has a more organic feel to it and it's not a lot of me just talking. Michelle is also very well versed in making collages, so thank you for being here, Michelle.
No problem.
I am going to start today by doing a background. So I've kind of decided some of the stuff that I would like to use as a background, and it's quite varied. As you can see, I've got some textured paper, I have some cardstock, I have bits of from the dictionary, some fabric, some doilies, all kind of very matted and muted colors, except for these little pops of color I'm going to do here. So I'm going to start with the background, and I don't like a lot of straight edges when I'm doing my background, so I like to kind of just tear, and you get a nice deckled edge along when you tear, and it's definitely a more organic feel. And I'm going to go off the page when I'm gluing, and that's okay too, because I can trim it after I'm done. So I'm just going to go ahead and start gluing with my glue stick here, and I'm just going to start to build up layers of paper, really, to make an interesting texture. The nice thing about dictionary and older paper is it's a little bit transparent, so translucent, so you can see through it. I got this little map of England here. I think I'm just gonna put at the side. And so for these lighter papers, I am just using the Yoohoo glue stick.
Can I help you glue?
You can help me glue, absolutely.
Well, you want this one ripped?
Always. 2 hands are better than one. And sometimes the paper will wrinkle up, And that's okay, I kind of like the wrinkles. It kind of adds more visual interest, more texture. So when I've got these thin things going on, I'm just using the glue stick. But if I'm going over to heavier paper or fabric, as I will be in a minute, I'll be using, I think, acrylic matte medium, because the hold is a bit stronger than just the glue stick. So here I have a piece of fabric, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a foam brush, and I have some acrylic matte medium here, and I'm going to put it down on the paper.
Can I use hodgepodge too, Heather?
Yeah, it's the same thing really.
What about white glue?
White glue, like I said before, will cause the paper to wrinkle more. You can use it. You want to consider the substrate. So if you are doing something on wood as opposed to paper, it might not be as big of an issue. But for paper, you'll get wrinkling. Oh yes. I'm gonna tear this paper a little bit more. And I'm actually going to go right on top, cover part of it. And you can go on top as well with the acrylic matte medium to kind of glue it down. It'll dry clear. It's a good way to make sure everything is stuck down. Oh, here we go. I've got this nice, I like this paper. I don't think I'm going to use all of it, but you can see through it, which gives adds a nice layer. So I'm going to cut some of it. Kind of like that down there on top of the other papers. And I think for this one, because it's a little bit different, it's very fibrous, I'm going to use acrylic matte medium. You could probably use the glue stick for this, or white glue even, but I think the acrylic matte medium will work better.
I believe the matte medium comes in two different, gloss and matte, does it not, Heather?
Yeah, it comes in matte for a less shiny look, a duller look, and then comes in gloss for a shinier finish. And I believe it also comes in satin as well for a kind of in between, kind of like paint. So little pieces here and there. I'm going to save this one for right now. Just going to go over a little bit more on the top of some of this. And it's nice, you can see the layers underneath. And I've got tissue paper. This is another thing I like to use a lot when I'm collaging is tissue paper, because it's very translucent. And it allows you to go over areas, and you can still see, like, you can still see the map and the lettering underneath. I like that. So I think what I'm going to do is add more. little bit more of that matte medium and just go over it, the edges especially. Make sure that they're lying down flat.
Need some more.
Thank you. You could even, afterwards, you could even paint over this if you wanted to, add color or to antique it a bit more. You can keep adding layers and layers and layers until you are satisfied with how your background looks. I think I'm pleased. For the most part, I feel like it doesn't really need anything there.
No, you're going to put the other stuff on there, Heather, right?
Yeah. So what I'll do right now is just finish going over with a coat of the acrylic matte medium just to make sure it's all kind of stuck down. Although having pieces slightly erased from the surface as well is just as acceptable. I feel there's really no right or wrong way to collage. So it's all about personal preference. So I'm going to let this dry and we're going to come back in a little bit and talk more about composition and the focal points of the collage. Okay. So while the background is drying, I'm going to show you how to do packing tape transfer, which is another way to add visual interest to your collage by adding more layers. So basically what I've done here is I've taken bits from the magazine and I've used my punch and I've just found colorful areas and I've just punched out a whole bunch of these little, I guess, flower shapes, and I've glued them down onto a piece of paper. Now I could use them just glued down, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to make it all flat so I could use it as a transfer. So I took it to a photocopy machine and I photocopied it, color photo. So here I have the glued on bits, and then this is the flat version that's just been photocopied. So to use, to do a packing tape transfer, you're gonna need your packing tape. And you're going to want to cover your image that you want to transfer. You're going to put packing tape on top. You want to make sure it's nice and smooth and that there's no wrinkles or air bubbles. And then,
Heather, can you use any photocopy machine?
ink works best, although I think you can use laser, I believe. Like an inkjet machine works best, because basically what you're doing is we want the ink to stick to the packing tape, and we want to remove the backing, so it'll be like transparent. You'll be able to see through it. So I've overlapped a little bit there where the tape, where I had to put the second piece of tape, and it's all covered. I'm just going to go over it again with my fingers, make sure that there's no air bubbles. And I'm going to cut it out smaller, just the area that I want. Now I'm just going to soak it in water, just like this, and I'd say about 5 minutes or so. The longer you soak it, the more the paper fibers will break down and the easier it is to do the next part. So I'm going to come back in about 5 minutes and I'll show you the next part. And here we go. Okay, so we're back, and it's been over 5 minutes since we've soaked the paper with the packing tape. So this is what it looks like on the front. I'm going to flip it over onto the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my finger and I'm going to start to remove the layers of paper ever so gently. You don't want to press too hard. If you press too hard, you're going to end up removing the ink. But what you're going to start to see happen here is that the ink is going to stay attached to the packing tape, and the paper fibers I'm removing, and that's going to cause the image itself to be transparent because it no longer has the paper on the background. So this process takes a little bit of time. You don't want to rush it. I like to keep my finger damp, so I keep putting it in the water. And I'm just going to keep doing this until all the paper fiber is off. Now I've done this with newspaper, I've done this with magazines, I've done this with photocopies. I think anything really that has been inked or has some kind of ink base to the pictures. So we're just going to keep doing this. So I'm going to keep doing this until it's how I want it, and then I'm going to come back and show you what it is I'm going to do with it for the collage. Okay, I'm back now with the completed photo transfer on packing tape. And as you can see here, it is transparent. So you can see through now the flowers and everything. So what I have here is I have a photocopy of a Victorian style dress that I wanted to use the packing tape transfer with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually place the packing tape transfer onto the dress.
Ooh,
like this.
wow.
And you can still see the dress through it. And I'm going to trim it so it follows the shape of the dress. So now her dress has a little bit of a pop of color that I like. Here. And I'm going to use this in my final collage. There we go. Scissors. The packing tape, you can tell when there's no more fibers, it'll feel smooth on the side where the paper was. It's still a little bit tacky, which is helpful. But if it isn't sticky, just use a little bit of glue stick to stick it on. And I like this because you can do all kinds of neat things with it. Somewhat transparent. And it really adds, I think, a dimension to your pieces. So there we have the packing tape transfer on top of the Victorian dress that I'm going to use as part of my collage. Alright, so now I'm ready to start working on the focal point of my collage, which is going to be this woman wearing this Victorian dress that I've altered with the packing tape transfer. I'm just going to put her parts all together on a gray background, just so I can put it all together and then cut her out and then place her where I want her in the composition. So I'm going to start with her head, actually. So I'm going to glue her head on. Now I've taken these bits and pieces from here and there and everywhere. Magazines, packing tape transfer, stamps. And it's the nice thing about collage. Collage really kind of blew up in the modern art history, in the modern art with Picasso, and then later with the Surrealists and Matisse. But the Surrealists had a lot of fun with it because they would take imagery that would be somewhat incongruent normally, and they would place it together and just kind of have fun with it. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm taking these individual pieces, I'm going to place them together. So I'm actually going to give her wings. So I think place her wings down and then see. That looks, this one needs to go in a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of mark where it's going to go on the paper. And then I'll glue those down. There's one. Two. And then I'm going to place her dress on top there. There we go. So far I'm liking the pops of color. So when I think of the Victorian era, I kind of think of being kind of drab, although it probably wasn't, but because all the pictures we see are either sepia toned or black and white, it's really hard to envision that era in color for some reason. So I like the idea of giving her these bold, bright colors mixed in with her black and white bodice there. And then those little flowers that I cut out from magazines, I'm going to use these to actually form a little crown. And I'm not going to glue them flat, actually. I kind of like the idea of them popping up off her head. So what I've done is I've folded them in half. See there? And I'm going to just kind of glue them with the colored bits sticking up. Just to kind of give her sort of like a flowery crown, if you will, or hat. And then one more for good measure. There.
Looks like a fancy hat now.
Fancy hat. Okay, so I'm going to just cut, and I'm going to leave a little bit of the gray around the outline of the woman, just because I want her to kind of really stand out from the background, and I feel that she might not if she doesn't have a little bit of the outline of the gray around her. So I'm going to cut her out. You can, you know, abstract in terms of subject matter can be, for collage in terms of subject matter can be abstract. It can be whimsical or funny, surreal. So there's really no wrong way to do a collage. She looks quite elegant here. Okay, so now I'm ready to start putting together the collage. What I've done here first is I've trimmed off any of the excess that were hanging over the edge. And I'm actually going to take a stamp pad, although you could use a marker, the edge of a marker. And I'm just going to go along the edge and I'm just going to darken it up with some ink. I just like the way it looks. It just kind of almost gives it like a border, makes it pop. So like I said, you could do this with a Sharpie, you could do it with a gold metallic Sharpie, any color you want. So there's the edge, and I'm actually going to do the edge of her as well. It might be actually easier to do her with a Sharpie. Because there's, yeah, Michelle, if we have one. Just because there's a lot of edges. Aha. So just taking your Sharpie and just running it along the edge. Kind of gives it like an outline.
Makes it pop out.
Yes. So before I start to glue everything down, I'm going to just play around with my composition on the background. Make sure it's how I like it, rather than just gluing everything down all at once and not really thinking about it. You want to give it some consideration as to where everything is going to go. There we go. So I'm going to gather all my elements of the collage here. I like to put words or sayings in mine sometimes. It's personal preference. You can choose to if you'd like, or you can choose not to. I found this in a magazine, Break Out of Your Shell. I thought that was great. So I have a little bit more of the doily here. I think I want it to stand out a little bit more, so I want to put the layer on top, probably just there. And I have these fun fellows. And this rather sassy lady down here, sassy individual. I'm actually gonna double these guys up, make them look like there's, maybe this is gonna come down a little bit more, kind of like she's popping out of the shell. Yeah. Butterfly. What are we thinking?
I'm gonna mark her around the butterfly.
Oh yes, yes, good idea, Michelle. Michelle's gonna just make it pop out a little bit more. I also have, I don't know what this is called. Michelle, do you know what it's called? Is it like?
It's a banding of some kind. Okay. It does have a special name though.
Like rick-rack,
something like that. Yeah.
I think it's pretty neat.
For sewing.
Yeah, I'm not a sewer, but I think it's, I like the shape of it. So I think I might use some of that as well on here. So I'm just going to play around a kind of repetitive, I like the repetitiveness of the heads up here. I'm going to speed up the video while I'm gluing up the collage. As I am doing so, I would like to briefly talk about a few of the many design principles which will help you with the composition of your collage. The first being repetition. The repeating of colors, images, and shapes can have great visual impact. Repetition helps to move the viewer's eyes around the various areas of the collage and helps to give cohesiveness to the overall composition. I've done this a few times here with the use of the color orange and the black and white imagery. Overlapping. The overlapping of elements in your composition adds depth, texture, and layers of dimension. This can be done in a variety of ways. Here you can see it in the background and in the placement of the black banding across the page. Guiding. The way in which you place your composition elements can help dictate where you want the viewer to look. It can be obvious, like text directing your eyes from left to right, or arrows and shapes pointing in one direction, or it can be as subtle, such as a slight tilt of imagery as I have done here. I'm purposely tilting the eye line of the images to gaze down and up at my central figure. Outlining, as was mentioned earlier, can make certain elements pop out and help differentiate between the foreground and the background. Outlines can be done in numerous ways, such as broken or dotted lines, inked edges, scratched lines, with letters, words, and even stitching. Finally, contrasting certain elements such as color, direction, and size, using black and white with pops of color, varying the size of imagery, changing the direction of visual elements, and applying different textures to your collage can really add visual impact. While the collage is drying, I'm going to show you one last image transfer technique you can utilize to help add depth and layers to your collage. This method is photo transfer using acrylic matte medium. First, mark where you would like the image to go in your composition using pencil at the corners. Next, using a sponge brush, apply a generous layer of acrylic matte medium to your background. Place your image face down onto the matte medium. It is important to remove any air bubbles or wrinkles to ensure good adhesion. Here, I am using a spoon to remove air bubbles. You can also use something with a thin, straight edge, like an old gift card or ruler. Place a scrap piece of paper over your image and cover with the heavy book to help dry flat. Let the image dry completely before the next step. Once your image is completely dry, use a sponge with warm water and gently soak the image to loosen the paper fibers. Using your finger to gently rub away the paper. This is a delicate process. It is not unusual to lose parts of your image. This adds to the worn vintage feel. This step also takes a long time. It helps to keep both the image and your finger slightly wet. Keep adding warm water and repeat the process until your image is clear of paper fiber. It really does take a long time. The final step is to seal your image with acrylic matte medium or a water-based varnish. This helps protect the image from being scratched. Here's the final piece I made using the photo transfer. Can you see other elements of design I used as well? Okay, and now we're back with the final part of the collage process. I'm going to just I have some acrylic matte medium here. You can use, what's it called?
Mod Podge.
Mod Podge, or any kind of decoupage glue as well. This is just, it acts as a sealer. So I'm going to go on top and I'm just going to brush a nice coat, and wherever, little bits are peeking up, I just want to get under it and just kind of make sure that it's going to lie flat.
Do you have to use a foam brush, Heather?
You don't have to. I like a foam brush. It's all personal preference, I think. That's a good question. Thank you, Michelle. So I'm just going to continue on doing a layer. It's not really, you could forgo this step as well if you wanted to. I just like to do it. It's extra insurance that everything's going to stick to where I want it to. I'd like to take this opportunity right now to thank Michelle for playing the peanut gallery and asking questions on everyone's behalf. There we go. And then for the final step, I have these metal letters that I found at a garage sale, I believe. I don't know where they're from, but they're a little bit heavier than the glue will allow. So I'm just going to use a touch of hot glue and glue them down on the surface. And then I think I will call this collage done. Thanks so much for watching. This concludes our collage workshop. If you have any questions, comments, or would like to share your collage with me, please email me at heatherk@agb.life. We would also love it if you shared your art with us by tagging us on Instagram. Thanks for watching.